Perdão, visual, Mr. Silver. There. That distortion, see it?
Hello, and welcome to Junkball Media, a video series that's part review, part retrospective, but mostly just stuff. This is the third and final part of the USS Enterprise retrospective. Here, we'll hit up her interior, her backstory, destruction, and other appearances. So let's get to it. This is the USS Enterprise retrospective part 3D, only in 2D. Her interior evolved over the 20 years she appeared on screen. Starting with the bridge. As you already know, it has the captain's chair in the middle surrounded with various workstations. From this early concept drawing, you can see many design elements that would eventually make it into the final version. It's on Deck A and faces forward, or does it? Common belief is that the bridge is oriented straight forward, but when you look at the position of the turbolift housing from the exterior, it's directly behind the bridge dome. However, from the interior, the turbolift is positioned at about 240 degrees port, which means that the bridge is actually angled about 30 degrees starboard. Now the bridge is intended to be oriented straight forward, so the turbolift was positioned here so that Captain Kirk wouldn't have to swivel completely backwards in order to face anyone entering from the turbolift doors. By allowing the captain's chair to only turn slightly in order to face the doors, it was just better for camera framing and storytelling purposes. The bridge was modified from its first appearance in the cage and the start of the original series, but it's mostly the same set with some cosmetic changes.
Could be these meteoroids.
The animated series added a second turbolift directly port of the main view screen. This placement continued into the Phase 2 concepts, which would eventually evolve into the refit bridge. And how about this captain's chair? The set of the refit bridge featured dozens of lit panels and animated screens. Since this was the late 70s, it took an enormous amount of circuit boards, wiring, and electronic gizmos to achieve this subtle effect in the background. This made the shooting set very loud and hot. This bridge set was reconfigured slightly for later movies. In Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the science officer's station is directly behind the captain's chair. For Star Trek II, it was relocated to the starboard side, which is where it was during the original series. This set would be modified many more times as bridges of other Starfleet vessels, like the Reliant, Grissom, Saratoga, Stargazer, Hathaway, Bozeman, Enterprise D Battle Bridge, Enterprise C, and various labs and rooms from other Starfleet bases. It also briefly served as the Enterprise A bridge in Star Trek IV. The set lighting is pretty intense in this shot, but it's probably because it's the only shot of her interior in this movie, so they really just wanted to make it pop. Can you imagine them using this sort of lighting for an entire movie? Wait, no, you don't have to. Getting back to the original bridge, it was recreated twice. Once for TNG's Relics, where Scotty drowns his sorrows in...
What is it?
An Appletini?
It is...
Surge Soda.
It is...
High C Ecto Cooler.
It is green.
Anyway, the Next Generation only had the resources to build a small section of the bridge. The rest was filled in using matte plates. When Scotty enters the holodeck simulation, they used footage from the original series. You can see where they married the old and new elements, with the separation between the dark gray and brown floor color. The original series set bridge didn't have brown floors. You can see the brown floors here when the actors are actually interacting with the set. The original bridge appeared again in Enterprises in A Mirror Darkly, where it was the bridge of the USS Defiant. No, not that Defiant, but since we're talking about the USS Defiant, part of the DS9 Defiance bridge appeared on Enterprise as a Vulcan view screen in the episode Carbon Creek.
Splendid, splendid, Captain. You're a veritable fountain of
Useless information. Now to main engineering. It evolved significantly over the decades. The room initially featured a long horizontal core. This long corridor element remains for the refit, but they also added a tall vertical warp core. Eventually, the set was modified for the Enterprise D's main engineering set. They even kept the elevator. Notice the silver wall behind Kirk. That's where they put the room where Spock dies. So how old is the Enterprise? Conjecture puts her launch in 2245, and she's destroyed in 2285, which makes her about 40 years old. Captain Robert April commanded her first. He says he oversaw her construction at the San Francisco Fleet Yards.
I was there in the San Francisco Navy Yards when her unit components were built.
Next up is Captain Christopher Pike.
I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives.
Then Captain James Kirk. And eventually Spock towards the end when she becomes a training vessel. Since she's already been in service for a few decades by the time we're introduced to her in the original series, she stands out from other Enterprises, which were brand new ships when they were introduced. This was the case with the NX-01, Enterprise D, B, and E. It gives her an added sense of history and reverence. However, her history gets a lot more convoluted when you consider the comic book miniseries Star Trek Countdown to Darkness. Since this comic takes place prior to Nero altering the timeline, this comic should still be set in the Prime timeline. Consistent with Star Trek lore, it's revealed in a flashback that Robert April commanded the Enterprise prior to Pike and Kirk. However, we see the Constitution-class Enterprise launch in the 2009 movie. So if this Enterprise is a brand new ship in the 2009 reboot, and this Enterprise was in service a few decades earlier, which Enterprise is this? Apparently a completely different Enterprise. This ship looks exactly like the Constitution-class Enterprise, down to the sculpt of her hull and the shape of her impulse exhausts. If this is supposed to be a different Starship Enterprise, the artist didn't make any effort to make it look like a different ship.
Well, shit. I'm serious.
The Enterprise received a fitting send-off when she was destroyed in Star Trek III. It was in service of the story and carried dramatic weight. Since she was sacrificed to save Spock, it's worth considering that Spock was her longest-serving crew member, dating all the way back to the days when he was young and felt the need to shout status updates.
Disappeared in that region approximately 18 years ago. Records show the tallest group has never been explored.
The auto-destruct codes used in Star Trek III were the same ones recited in the episode, "Let this be your last battlefield."
Destruct sequence 1. Code 1.
Code 1.
1A.
1A.
Code 1.
1A.
2B.
2B.
Code
Code 1B.
B.
2B.
2B.
3.
New models of the ship were constructed for this sequence. This one used thin styrofoam for the hull. The effects team melted the styrofoam hull by dripping acetone on it. I dropped acid before doing this video. Of course, the main model would continue on. This also isn't the last time we see her, so let's cover some of her later appearances. Following Star Trek V, Paramount heavily invested in the Star Trek reboot, featuring a younger Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It would also feature an earlier form of the Enterprise. This production never made it out of development, but these concepts give us a good idea of what we could have seen. It coincidentally bears striking resemblance to the NX-01. For the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations, the DS9 crew finds themselves wrapped up in the events of the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. A new physical model of the ship was created. It's highly detailed and worth repeated use, but this would be her only appearance. A CGI model appeared in the finale of Enterprise, and the 2006 HD remaster of the original series, since the original film elements weren't suitable for the HD restoration process across the entire series. It's up to you whether you think these new CGI elements improve the overall experience, but it's nice seeing the ship in sharper detail. And finally, my favorite nod to the original Enterprise is when she appeared in the Battlestar Galactica fleet. It's faint and it's in the background, but it's there. So there you have it, the original USS Enterprise. If you've hung in there for this entire retrospective, cheers. I appreciate it, and as always, thanks for watching, you stubborn thick-headed Vulcan.